I didn't raise my voice when the HOA president waved the violation notice in my face and told me I had trespassed on HOA land. I just slid the counter-certified boundary survey across the table, with its neat little stamp in blue ink, and let the silence stretch. Their lawyer leaned over, squinted at the coordinates, then quietly shut his binder like it had turned radioactive. That was the first time the president's voice cracked, when she realized the fence they'd hacked through wasn't even on their property. It was on mine. The truth is, I hadn't moved out here to fight anyone. After 30 years of working in a noisy city, my wife and I wanted a slower kind of life. I found a few acres at the edge of a subdivision in northern Colorado. Nothing fancy, just a strip of land with a tree line and enough space to breathe. There was an old split-rail fence that ran along the edge of my property, the kind of thing you barely notice until you live beside it. I liked it because it marked where my yard ended and the forest began. We fixed up the place slowly, built a little garden, put in a bench under the aspens, mended the roof one summer. I thought we'd be left alone. I thought peace was still possible. The first sign of trouble was almost laughable. I came home one afternoon to find a bright orange paper flapping on my gate. Notice of violation, it said in all caps, like I'd been caught committing a felony. According to the HOA, my fence was non-compliant because it wasn't built to their height specifications. The thing was older than the HOA itself, probably hammered into the dirt by some rancher 50 years ago. It wasn't even in their jurisdiction. My deed clearly showed the property line ended before their boundary. But still, they fined me $200 and threatened further action. I figured it was a clerical mistake, so I sent them a polite email with a scanned copy of my deed attached. The response wasn't what I expected. Instead of clearing it up, they doubled down. Another letter arrived, this one claiming that my fence encroached on common HOA land and that it needed to be removed within 30 days. Then came the warnings about daily fines. When I asked for a meeting, they sent me a time but canceled it the morning of. When I showed up at the next open board session, the president smiked and said my issue wasn't on the agenda. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I stopped assuming they were reasonable people. I stopped assuming this was a misunderstanding. That's when I started printing everything. Every email, every notice, every photo of my fence, dated and time-stamped. That's when my evenings became about property law instead of fishing. It was my wife who pushed me further, honestly. One night she sat down at the kitchen table and said she didn't feel comfortable taking the dog near the fence anymore. She was afraid of running into board members, afraid of more shouting matches. I hated that. I hated seeing her look over her shoulder in our own yard. So I stayed up later that night and dug through the county's digital archives. I found an old map from 1972. Back when the county parceled the land for development. My lot's boundaries were clearly marked, and they hadn't changed in half a century. The fence wasn't even close to their land. But I wanted more than an old map. I wanted something ironclad. So I hired a surveyor. Not just any surveyor, a state-certified one with 30 years of experience and a reputation for testifying in court. He came out with his tripod, his GPS gear, his orange vest, and spent an afternoon marking every corner of my property. A week later, I had the report in hand, complete with a signed seal from the state of Colorado. It confirmed exactly what I knew. The HOA had no claim, no jurisdiction, and no authority. And yet, just 2 days after the report arrived in my mailbox, I came home to find the fence cut. Not taken down carefully. Cut. Splintered rails lying in the grass, posts sawed clean through. They had trespassed, vandalized, and destroyed what they had no right to touch. My dog was wandering loose. The garden opened today. I stood there staring at the wreckage and felt something colder than anger settle in. It wasn't rage. It was resolve. From that moment, I stopped playing defense. I called the sheriff and filed a trespassing and vandalism report. I emailed the board and politely informed them that their members had destroyed private property under a false claim. I attached the survey as a PDF. Their lawyer wrote back with the kind of oily confidence you only get when you think you're untouchable. He said the HOA was well within its rights and that any complaint I filed would be dismissed. That email went straight into the evidence folder I'd been building. By then it was over 2 inches thick. The board called a special hearing about my so-called violation. I showed up with my binder under one arm and the survey rolled in a tube under the other. They went through their routine first, Lots of stained language about community standards and compliance, the president pointing her finger like a schoolteacher scolding a child. Then she accused me of encroaching and announced that the board had voted unanimously to fine me $500 a week until the fence was removed entirely. She must have thought the gavel in her hand was a crown. That's when I reached into the tube and slid the CV across the table. Not a word, just paper and ink. I watched the lawyer's face as he read the certification stamp. He didn't even make it past the first page before his lips tightened. The silence was delicious. I leaned back, crossed my arms, and waited. The president blustered for a moment, then stuttered, then looked down at her notes like they might save her. They didn't. For the first time, the board looked like what they really were, a group of neighbors way out of their depth. What followed wasn't quick, but it was inevitable. The sheriff's office followed up on my vandalism complaint, and suddenly board members were giving depositions. My lawyer, because yes, by then I'd hired one, filed a civil suit for damages. We didn't even need to go to trial. The HOA's insurance company cut me a check that more than covered the repair of my fence and then some. Within 6 months, the lawyer who'd once sneered at me was no longer representing them, and 2 board members had resigned under personal reasons. These days, the fence is back up, stronger than ever, and set in concrete. Nobody touches it. The HOA hasn't sent me a single notice in over a year. When I drive through the neighborhood, some of them wave like nothing ever happened. Others turn away. Either way, it's quiet. And quiet is all I ever wanted. The funny thing is, I didn't win by yelling louder. I won by refusing to yell at all. I let the paper speak, the dates and stamps and signatures. In the end, all their bluster folded under the weight of a single fact. I knew where my land began and where theirs ended. They thought they could erase that line with threats and saw blades. They learned that some lines are set in stone, and some people know how to defend them.